Hello and welcome to Better Under Pressure. I'm Sara Milne Rowe, author of The Shed Method and founder of Coaching Impact. And in this podcast, I talk to leaders from all walks of life about being better under pressure and using pressure for better. I want to explore how we handle pressure in a world that is becoming more and more complex, the impact that pressure has on our ability to perform at our best, and what we do to be better under pressure.
The concept of every day is a school day. Yeah. And actually it's a reframing. I always say I reframe failure into feedback, for example. So I always play with, they both start with F. So, why use failure when you can use feedback? And the same is obstacle opportunity. Why use obstacle when actually what's the opportunity that's been given to you? If anything, just as an opportunity to learn. I grew up in communist Romania and I went to a boarding nursery. The odds were stacked against me. Boarding nursery from the age of 2 to the age of 5. And actually that was quite common now that I look back. It wasn't so uncommon for professional people. The system wanted everybody to have a job and, have a profession. The intention was a good intention. So they gave them this social care option, if you like. So they will take me there on a Monday morning and they will pick me up on a Saturday morning. So I learned discipline, from a tiny, weeny age, being able to conform, to stay in line, to share my dormitory with 30 other children. And
age two.
Blimey. Madness.
Today, I'm talking to Alina Addison, ex-accountant, ex-investment banker, executive coach, and now author. Alina left Romania as a young adult. Soon afterwards, she went into accountancy with PwC before joining Rothschild Co. There, she became the first woman to be promoted to managing director and head of trading, and all while she was working 4 days a week. In her recently launched book, The Audacity Spectrum, Alina combines personal experience with extensive research to share her mission. She wants to ignite audacious leadership in people through a bold mix of courage, care, and nonconformity. In our conversation, Alina shares what she learned from being that boarding school toddler, why her life changed thanks to a friend's audacious question, and how she ended up completing 2 degrees in 2 countries at the same time.
Alina, thank you so much for joining me on Better Under Pressure. I'm very, very thrilled to have you on for so many reasons, but I think we'll have lots to talk about in terms of pressure.
Oh, thank you so much, Sara. I've been really looking forward to this, to this playful, fun conversation.
Brilliant. So let's kick off with, how do you experience pressure?
It's interesting, as I was thinking about, you and pressure in general. For me, pressure is such an interesting concept in terms of pressure points. But for me, I have only really learned to be in my body in the last, 5 years or so. So for me, the pressure was always, very much mental. So I would feel the stress. I will just go into, this sort of fight, flight. For me was more fight. But pressure now, it's more in my body. So I feel tense. Mm-hmm. I'm more able to see it as it comes and acknowledge it. But it's very much a much more of a body experience for me. So my shoulders will tight, my back will tight. I will not be able to breathe in the way I would normally do. So I've got much more awareness of that today.
Okay. So has this been a journey then for you in terms of pressure? Because I know that you've had, partly why I wanted to have you on, Alina, is because I think there's been so many interesting passages in your life, from Romania to the UK, to working in an investment bank, to owning your own hotel, to being a parent of 2 children, with one with Asperger's. There's so many moments when we spoke where I just thought, oh God, this is so interesting how you've managed different components of your life, like so many of us actually. But this relationship with pressure, obviously, sits at the heart of these conversations for me, as to how people, A, recognize it, and B, manage it and turn it into something that is actually very enlivening. But how do we make that shift? And what I think you've just said there is, in the last 5 years, you've managed to recognize it more physically than you did before. So what was happening before then?
But I think for me, again, one of my coping mechanisms and the reason, and thank you for reminding me actually all of that journey and the different passages. And, I think from the outside in, if you tell someone the stories, they are very, very powerful passages in terms of pressure points. But I had my coping mechanism has always been, it's going to be okay. So that self-talk has always been very present for me, in as much as the mind was always encouraging me, if you like, from inside out, is, this is just a tough time, but there is a silver lining here. So I've always had that immense, huge, actually, faith that no matter what, we're going to come out. And of course, I'm human, so there are moments which at the time felt terrible. But someone used this analogy for me recently, and it's interesting, as women will understand that more, is, if you've been through birth, everybody asks, why on earth would you want to do it again? But we forget those moments because of the outcome. And it's the same sometimes with pressure. We go through these huge moments of pressure, but then something else comes out of it. And then we forget, or we choose to ignore whatever coping mechanisms we have. So for me, that's been one of the things I think that's allowed me to navigate pressure in a way that seems, incredible at times, really. Yeah.
It's interesting, that example about birth, actually, because I was just ruminating on that when you said it, thinking I think it's less that maybe we forget, but I think what you highlighted there for me is the end product, that the pressure or the pain or whatever it is worth it because of what you're doing it for, which really hooks into, I think, that whole power of the bigger meaning or the bigger purpose of the moment of pressure. So I just made that correlation for myself there, in terms of it's just that whole moment of knowing it's worth it. You said having a sense of silver lining, always knowing that there's a silver lining in everything. How did you learn that? Because I've had so many conversations with people, and me included, where, the first actually self-talk that comes in is potentially doom and gloom. How have you had that? Who taught you that? Where did you learn that?
Wow, I believe that a lot of that was instilled in by my father. So he was a huge positive talker as I grew up. And that's what I heard at home. So I'm pretty sure there was a lot to do with the way he was just positive reinforcing a lot of the stuff. And, my sister has been through the same, and she's got different memories than I do, because what he did a lot is he talked a lot in terms of you can do it, and he even had sort of mottos. I remember he used to use Seneca quotes, for example, everything is possible. And so my house now, as a kid, I remember having all sorts of different quotes, or he would just give examples. So I think that instilled in me from very early stages this belief, the self-belief, and also the belief that there is a reason why we're going through some of these obstacles, which actually for me, I reframe one of my biggest models, if you like, that I use for self, but also for my clients and for my family, for my friends. It is this reinforcing and reframing. So I lead with why not? So when everybody says, I think this is too difficult, and they will just give an example, for me, it's like, why not try? So I always lead with, let's experiment, and then we'll find out, because there's something that is going to come out of it regardless. And that is that concept of a learning mindset, the concept of every day is a school day. Yeah. And actually, it's a reframing. I always say I reframe failure into feedback, for example. So I always play with, they both start with F. So, why use failure when you can use feedback, and the same is obstacle opportunity. Why use obstacle when actually what's the opportunity that's been given to you? If anything, just as an opportunity to learn. And yes, I grew up in communist Romania, and I went to a boarding nursery. So, the odds were stacked against me.
A boarding nursery?
Yeah, boarding nursery from the age of 2 to the age of 5. My parents, and actually that was quite common now that I look back. It wasn't so uncommon for professional people. The system wanted everybody to have a job and, have a profession. So the intention was a good intention. So they gave them this, social care option, if you like. So they will take me there on a Monday morning and they will pick me up on a Saturday morning. So I learned discipline, from a tiny, weeny age. All of that, as I said, sort of, being able to conform, to stay in line, to share my dormitory with 30 other children, and
age two.
Blimey, madness. And so I made that choice because, again, it's someone said, well, yeah, but that actually, if you used your logical mind, it should have been the other way. But for me, I must have made that moment, that choice that it is going to be okay. And sharing, for me, having had the sharing with 30 other kids has become a massive value of mine. Right. To always share. And then I did actually, interestingly, talking about pressure and sports. So I ended up as in communist Romania, most girls will do gymnastics, so you had to go through that. Then they'll choose the best to go become the Nadia Comaneci of this world. So that was a singular sport. And then I did athletics. I did sprinting 100 meters. And yet I was part of teams, even if it was and so I ended up being part of teams who went on training grounds. And I think, again, that it was a lot of reinforcement of, we are in it together, we're going to play, we're going to do things together. So I'm convinced if I were to trace back, as you said, there is always a silver lining, because I experienced it in those moments.
Yeah.
Now, I know this is relatively early to offer an insight, but I couldn't resist. This aspect that Alina is talking about resonates so strongly with my conversation with Simon, my business partner, in the last episode, that somehow the pressure doesn't feel so bad because you're in it together. Being at a boarding nursery, she learnt from an extremely young age that anything can be dealt with when it's shared. And Simon mentioned when he was training with the Marines, admittedly when slightly older than Alina, that the power of the group became a vital source of energy for him too. That power of others to lift you up. Alina uses the word discipline, and I think that is the common ingredient in both Simon's and Alina's story. Him as an adult and her as a 2-year-old, and in fact is a common ingredient in many of my conversations on Better Under Pressure. Learning how to be better under pressure does require a sense of discipline. So you can instill a behaviour and call on it when you're under pressure. It's the discipline of breathing. When I was a young teacher, you remember when Wayne told me and the other 29 teenagers in the room exactly how boring my lesson was. But that breathing that allowed me to regulate my dog brain under pressure was a discipline instilled through regular practice by my violin teacher. It's the discipline of the drills essential to professionals whose work involves life and death situations. The childhood discipline of dealing with pressure together that Alina mentions plays a fundamental role in how she approaches moments of pressure now, and is why sharing is such a massive value of hers.
So what's been the hardest and toughest pressure that you've witnessed or experienced?
Oh, it's so interesting, because even that question for me feels difficult to answer, because now I'm looking back, it's like I didn't find it difficult, but of course I did in the moment. So I think it's performing in terms of, I used to go to do athletics every day of the week except the weekends. So again, that routine helped me. Then I left the country very early. When I was in university, I came to the UK and I was studying a lot. So studying for universities was a lot of pressure, for all of my exams. But again, I'm using the word lucky, which I'm reluctant to, but I can't find any other one, is I was lucky to be good at it. So again, the reinforcements of I worked very hard, but then I was rewarded through my results. So it was that positive reinforcement, hard work, easy. hard work, easy. So I didn't really have many pressure within school. I worked part-time. So I used to, again, I found it easy, and even saying it, finding it easy sounds a little bit pompous, but I used to go to university so I got a scholarship to study in Liverpool. Mm-hmm. And then and there's a story in there because I ended up doing 2 years in one. I came to the UK when I was, in early 20s, and I used to work as an interpreter for an English charity that came to Romania, and I met these two wonderful, wonderful guardian angels, as I call them, Jin and Dave. And then they invited me to the UK. They were from Merseyside. Merseyside for Romania was their charity. And they said one day, let's go to Liverpool University and see if you can become a student, which to me seemed nuts. But we did on a rainy day. And Jin says, where's the admission office? Just like that on a Saturday. And then we went, it was David Liston, and we had this conversation where she said, we've got this wonderful, brilliant girl here, what it would take for her to study in the UK. And I remember him, how shocked and gobsmacked he was. And by the time Jean actually asked me to have my results translated in English, which I did, so I had them with me. And then he said, look, she's even got the results, her A-star results. So he looked at them and he said, oh, you could actually come and study in the UK. Just like that. He said, you'll be an international student and you have to pay the international student fee, which was about £8,000. So that was, for me, it was a very quick no, that's never going to happen. At which point, Jean audaciously says, what if we adopt Alina? I mean, she just came. And then he looked, and obviously he thought, oh, she really cares. That was, for me, that was the first time of, example of advocacy. I had many others, but that was, a huge one, because it did literally change my life through that one audacious conversation. Because he said, Alina, how much do you want to come? And I said, I'd love to. But to me, it was a sort of bit of a fairy tale. And he said, leave it to me. And then I'll see what I can do. That was September. And by Christmas, I had a letter from him saying, you've got a scholarship from the European Union. So I came to the UK the following year in Liverpool. But I was going into my final year of university in Bucharest. And it was such a hard decision, talking about pressure, interestingly, because I had to make this decision, do I go to Liverpool or do I stay to finish my studies, which were 5 years. I was going to, I was studying international relations, a great degree, economics in Bucharest, but I didn't want to miss this, what to me was a one-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So when I lead with this, why not? For me, it's like I also just grabbed the opportunities by both.
That's what I'm really, really hearing from this, actually, Alina, is the idea of somebody walking in and just saying, can this girl go to this university? I mean, that is such a brave and, in your words, audacious thing to do. But like, how many of us would not do that because the pressure would be too great, or the fear of what would happen would be too great? So I can absolutely start to see why you've developed this. Let's just go for it. Just do it. Just try it.
And when you have the attitude, I mean, again, I'm filtering through my own, can-do type attitude. But when you do have it, for me, what I'm also now with my wisdom of today, what I'm realizing looking back, you start, things align. What they say, the stars align and they realign. Because I came thinking I'm giving up the degree in Bucharest. That was the worst that could happen, but I'm making this sort of new life. But then what actually then happened is I came and I found out that the exams in Liverpool were in December and the exams in Bucharest were in January. And then the exams in Liverpool were in May and the exams in Bucharest were in June. So I ended up
not doing both.
Over, and I did them both.
Oh,
But and so talking about pressure, and so one of my tips again, how did I sometimes dealt with pressure is actually surrounding myself with some wonderful people. And so in this particular case, what happened is I had two great friends, best friends, and they would go to the courses, and in those 30 years ago, they would write the courses that the teacher will say, and they'll make notes, and they use that sort of indigo carbon paper.
Yes,
so they would do it for me, and then they'll send it in the post. So I actually had the notes taken by my two friends.
So you're really being backed. You were being backed.
Hugely.
Yeah. Wow. So okay. So tell me how you take all of that attitude into an investment bank, because you had, how many years did you work as a trader?
So 15 years as a trader, but before that, so I started in the sort of the whole financial services industry. So I qualified as an accountant. So
Right.
after uni in Liverpool, then I went on and became an accountant with PwC at that time.
Yes.
And then after I qualified with PwC, then I went on and worked for Rothschild and Co for another 15 years before I became a coach. Yeah.
And so how did all of this play out? How did this mindset that you developed clearly from your father through to your experience at school, boarding school as a young kid, then all of that passage that you've just told us, how did that help you deal with the immense pressure of working in high-level financial environment?
I mean, I think it's going back to the same principle of why not. So I remember, again, I think with PwC, because I was good at exams, I suppose, I ended up doing another 3 years of exams. So I had almost 10 years of exams. And when I was thinking about what am I going to do, what's the type of career that I'd like to do, I didn't get into BA, which was the biggest disappointment. I wanted to go into the British Airways at the time management, sort of training program, and I didn't. And someone said, well, you're obviously good at exams. Why don't you do accountancy? Because, that will be like almost a passport to anything. Which didn't make a lot of sense, but I thought, well, not, I'll try that. And that's what I did. I applied for the accountant and I got PwC. And actually, I think it was also Deloitte. I decided it was Deloitte in Liverpool, PwC in London, and I ended up London. And then 4 years later, most of the people, I mean, they take a lot of people in accountancy and then they have a few left because they have a phenomenal alumni. And again, I was at crossroads thinking I'm getting bored. I'm not sure this is what I want to do for another 20 years. And someone said, why don't you try investment banking? So I started, looking for it. And when I was looking to the obvious candidates, I mean, at the time, I remember interviewing with Credit Suisse, with some of the obvious candidates. And Rothschild was one of them. And they are, if anybody knows about, I mean, they are one of the most reputable financial institutions, known for integrity, for the sort of blue blood. And again, on the face of it, didn't really fit in. I was this outlier, coming from Romania, and then going to Liverpool, not from, Oxbridge, none of that. Although I did have a first class from Liverpool, so that helped. But it was a very unconventional CV in many ways. And it was this, why not? Someone said, you are not going to fit in. And it's true. I remember going in, I thought, well, I'm not sure. But then I had none of that chip on my shoulder. Even my ex-husband used to say, you're just coming from, in a joking, playful tone, the little peasant from Romania, he used to call me. And I thought, it's like, so what? I really genuinely didn't feel there was any difference. So I suppose that was why I got, and they wanted me. I mean, I dare to say that on a podcast out loud, but they wanted me more than I wanted them, because someone did put this doubt in my mind. Am I really going to fit in? And so they interviewed me and they offered me a job, and I just wasn't sure. I mean, it's crazy to think I almost said no to it. And they did something brilliant. I mean, I'm giving them a lot of credit for that. They had, at the time, a woman manager, Ranjit, her name was. And she was different. She was super smart, beautiful, Indian lady, which again, didn't feel like she was going to fit in. And she took me for a champagne bar for a chat to almost convince me to join them. And that's what sealed the deal for me. And then the rest was history. Then I ended up becoming, very fast track within that organization. So I became the head of trading, the head of execution. I had my 2 children while I was there. And it was a very, very traditional, conventional career, very fast as well, in many ways.
Did you feel pressure in that role? Did you have to lead other people who were feeling pressure? How does pressure turn up in that regard? And how did everything that you just talked about serve you, Alina?
Oh, 100% there is pressure in the environment. I mean, that is an environment that thrives on pressure. And I mean, it's still the same today. It's at the financial services industry, there is just so much pressure to perform, pressure to drive and strive for excellence, because that's what they are known for, and then so you again sort of conforming and making sure that the attention to detail, the attention to quality, because they are a consultant, they are an investment bank and offering advice to some of the most reputable companies in the world. So you had to the pressure to be at your best, everybody around us 100%. And I did have people, yes, I had a team, I had people that I worked for, I had people that worked for me. I never said for me, actually. For me, it's with me. So I always had this sort of inclusive attitude to life. And yeah, it's, again, I suppose for me, the working hard and going that extra mile also helped me in that environment. So for me, this notion of little extra, it's also very dear to my heart. And I've got that on my LinkedIn profile. The difference between ordinary and extraordinary is the little extra. And that is another concept that's very consistent in my life, the little extra. And you talked about my hotel, which was one of the projects. And it's a little extra because to get to the hotel, there is this little extra. It's almost like the little extra mile, which it's a bumpy road. Because it's on a hill. So you have to be prepared. I mean, that's one of the things that some people really complain about and some people really appreciate. And I always say it's like you choose which one you want to be. Because in order to get there, that's the only way to get there. You have to be okay for that little extra mile where it's a bumpy mountain road.
So is that what you say to yourself when you're hitting those moments which requires a little extra of yourself? Because also we've not even talked about you as a mother yet and running this business. Is it literally a mantra that you say can you just talk us through what you do, Alina, in those moments where you're hitting a bumpy patch or you're leading someone who's hitting a bumpy patch? What do you do to apply that little bit extra?
I mean, for me, it goes back to the reframing. Let's have a look at what is, what if it's good? What if it's good? And I'll give you an example just to make it real. So in my personal life as a mother, as you said, so I'm a mother of two beautiful children. So my son turned 20 and I've got a daughter of 17 and my son is on the spectrum. And one of, his biggest passion has been animals. I mean, to obsession, of course, if anybody knows what. And so as a child, he wanted a dog. And I was not giving in. I mean, I was this investment banker, the idea of having a dog. So I ended up with guinea pigs. I ended up with hamsters. I ended up with you name it. And in the end, I had to give in to having a dog. So we had a dog. And about 2 years later, Dan says, Mum, I want another dog. And that to me is like, oh my God. But, if you know anything about it, they never give up and they cannot hear no. So that's another part of my story is I had to learn to navigate that, to raise a child who could literally physically not hear a no. And he got so smart at using my own techniques. So he would say, Mum, why did you want two children? I mean, and so he would be so rational about it. And it's like, well, because I thought, you will have a companion. It's not like, exactly, Mum. That's why I want another dog. And then I would go on to say, oh, Dan, but what if, they're not going to get on? Can you imagine that? And then he said, what if they're not going to get on? You are the one who always says, what if it's good? And now you're choosing to use that. And he's like, wow. So he was beating me at my own game. Because, he's obviously, for me, it was always having led with, what if it's good? So I couldn't, that is like just being him using my own tactics. What if it's good? And I am really glad to say that it turned out to be the best investment and the best decision of our lives, really. Because not only those dogs ended up being the best friends, it's been the best therapy for him and for us as a family.
Yeah. But it's very hard, isn't it, when you're leading someone who is feeling pressure to say, well, what if it's okay? What if it's like, at what point does that actually become dismissive of, I'm really interested in this dynamic between leading in a positive way and enabling people to go that extra bumpy ride that you were talking about, but at the same time not dismiss something that they're genuinely feeling. For me, this is very much when pressure goes from a positive energy into a negative one, or, you know, positive stress to distress. How do you manage that? Because it feels like you've got a very clear barometer with yourself, but how is it that you lead others? And I mean, I'm sure your son's taught you loads in this, but what happens? How do you do that?
Yeah, and that's an interesting, dilemma for me, because I've realized over the years that it's harder for, potentially for others to lead with the why not when they're in the moment of stress, as you said. And actually, one very simple model, which I'm sure you also use in your own practice, is the sort of comfort zone model. So I always say, the comfort zone, that circle is where we feel comfortable, and most people want to live because it feels comfortable. But it's coming from a learning model. But outside the comfort zone is the learning zone, the stretch zone, which feels uncomfortable. So it's acknowledging that it's going to feel uncomfortable in order to learn, in order to grow, actually, and almost being at the edge of that. I mean, most people, I say, just stay at the edge of the comfort zone. Okay, just that. At least you are in the growing zone. But for me, I also acknowledge that I tend to be at the very edge of the learning zone, because I can push that. I love to go that little extra mile, which not everybody can, or they're willing to. Now, outside of this one circle and then another circle, it's another circle, which is the panic zone, which is what you're talking about, is when you become distressed, when it's just the fear and the pressure and the overwhelm. It's so much that we freeze, we fight, we flight. So it's acknowledging what is your, in terms of the pressure calibration almost. And so for me, I've learned to acknowledge, asking the questions, so if I were to lead someone, where are they? How does that feel for them? And going back to your original point of, what are we doing this for? What's the purpose of it all? Because if the purpose is bigger, and it's interesting with my son on the spectrum, they are driven by, if I can even call it that, by interest. So, if he's not interested in something, it's very difficult for him to get motivated. And so I can try anything, whereas for me, if it's important, then I'll get motivated. So it's calibrating the importance or the interest for the other person. But I lead with encouragement. So I always say, I just lead with encouragement. And when people ask me, what do you do, Alina? I just say, I give people courage. That's it. So I will just encourage people. And this, I think it's like any emotions are contagious, as you know, positive, negative, we contaminate. So for me, it's like, what's the worst that can happen? Let's experiment. And, also understanding that, it's not everybody has got the same appetite for risk as I do.
This last comment that Alina shares is interesting, that not everyone under pressure has the same appetite for encouragement or for being asked, what's the worst that can happen? And yet it's something that many of my guests say they do to turn pressure into an energy that's useful to them. I'm a bit like Alina and tend to offer others under pressure a positive reframe or some encouragement. I love that word, as it has courage buried inside it. And often that's actually what they need. However, over the years, I've learned, through my children in particular, that it's important to judge when it's useful to offer that positive reframe, and when in fact they simply just want to talk, and all they want from me is to listen and acknowledge. And the same is true with clients. So allowing space to talk and judging when to encourage, either yourself or someone else, can be a crucial component when pressure builds.
Have you ever had a moment where you have found that difficult to push that yourself into the what if positive way of looking, your silver lining approach to life. Has there been moments where that has really been stretched?
Definitely. I mean, I wouldn't be human if I didn't go through those moments. And actually what's coming up to mind is where has that been tested for me?
Yes.
Where
Yes.
have I been tested? Is this really true, Alina? And for me, that's been the personal life. That's where I've been really tested with my with my son. And yes, because I mean, he also found, it's difficult to say no. And for me, I'm leading with a yes. So there's always been that tension. But, we also had a massive trauma when he was a child. And he went through, a really, really tough patch at one time. And I find it really even difficult to go back. So I think sometimes I've probably just, that's the moment where I'm blanking it out of my own memory. But, he was so low into the dumps of just saying, life is not worth living type thing. And I found myself, with him, really tough moments of trying to just jump off the window. And I mean, that's panic for anyone, but for a mother. And, that moment of pressure of what do you do? How do you act in those moments? And, I've learned, I mean, those moments I did panic. So, I mean, there were moments of panic for me when I now look back, leading with fear rather than with, so I was tested. Of course I was. It's like, you can't lead with everything is going to be okay in those types of pressure for me, where it's almost like life and death. Now I would do it differently, interestingly. I would sort of calm my own nervous system. But of course, it's a learning process. It's a journey.
Yeah. How do you calm your own nervous system?
Well, now I remember to breathe. Yeah, I mean, as simple as that. It's just like literally taking that extra, just the extra, what I used to do is, without even knowing, is I used to just literally stop breathing and then realize. But take that pause. For me is as a sprinter, I remained a sprinter for a very long time with the good and the bad, which meant that I rarely stopped. So and I mean that when I go into my overdrive, I still do it, of course, but now I remember more that it's time to stop, it's time to do. And so that's how I soothe my nervous system.
To know when to stop.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's so pertinent for so many of us, isn't it? That knowing when to stop moment. Is that what took you out of investment banking, Alina?
Well, yes and no. It's interesting. For me, the investment banking was, and so it was at the same time that my son had this trauma.
Okay.
So it coincided with that. And so it was that was a very, very, very tough year for me. There was, and I wrote my book, The Audacity Spectrum, which is coming out in August, but it started as a different book, interestingly, because I had this, and again, Dan as a tool for him to cope with his own trauma, he actually wrote his own book. And it was a cathartic process for him. He went obsessive for 3 months, and he would just write and write and write.
Wow.
And he was only 11 at the time. So I'm talking about 10 years now. And it was just put into, it was too much in there to even, but it was obviously for him to share. It was just more for him. And, it's sitting in a drawer. It's interesting to even talk about it. It just came into my orbit. And then a few years later, I was having a conversation, I think it was with Mandy, our friend. And yes, and it was like, oh, maybe I should tell that story. And because she was writing a memoir at the time, and I got inspired by that, and I thought, oh, maybe I can write my memoir. I think it was called 3 Traumas in 12 Months or something, and that's how I began the journey. And it became a different book. It became a leadership book. And, Dan always jokes, it's like, Mum, I wrote the book and now you're taking the credit. So we always play with it. It was my idea, and you stole my idea, which I think I've got a good, I've got a good reputation for stealing people's ideas and then putting them in action. As a head of
Yay.
it's
Yes.
like, people always talk about ideas and ideas for years and years and years. And then it's like, well, what if we tried? What if we just do something, experiment with it?
Yes.
And a lot of my life has been just experiment. This sounds like a great idea, how it would look in practice.
Yes.
How would that actually? And then for me, it's like, if it doesn't work, we'll move on. So to answer your question, for me, it was a tough 12 months. Do I still want to do this for another 20 years?
Yes.
There was a lot of change within the business. We took over a hedge fund. It became a really difficult. And I think for me, going through what I now know as sort of post-traumatic stress disorder, I became hypersensitive to almost anything. So I will see things that wouldn't align to my own principles. And so I became more vocal. I always a sort of good girl, but almost like I would sing, and I had a position of seniority, so I could say it, and I could see it became difficult. So for me, I also had this coach, John, that, everything happens through people, as we talk, back. And yeah. I was watching him doing a fantastic job, and I just thought, oh my God, what it would be like to do that. So I got inspired. I always say Dan was my catalyst for change.
Yeah.
Really. But my own coach was my inspiration. So I just made this audacious decision. I remember going to John and saying, I'm packing it all in. Because when we had the trauma, I said, I'm packing it all in. And he said to me, no, you won't. And I'm thankful to him forever, because I didn't do it. I still continued to, he said, you can do this job with your eyes closed, which I could. So he said, just keep on to it. And then we'll sort out everything that's, out there in your personal life. And, but a year later, I thought I still had this, I could do something else. And I gave myself 2 years. It was an experiment for me, because he said to me, Alina is like, whoa, like any great coach would say, they will encourage you. They won't say, no, you can't do it. He said, whew, that's a big change. And, you're really going to have to, again, we're joking about the extra mile, because if you want to have your lifestyle as an investment banker, you're going to have to be in the top. I think he said you have to be in the top 5% of the coaches in the world. And I jokingly went back to him and I said, John, I'm going to be in the top 2. And and that was sort of almost that intention, that commitment. But I also had this, what I call calculated risk as a trader, it was a 2-year experiment. So if it wasn't going to happen in the 2 years, then I will then look to have another experiment. I was an accountant, I was an investment banker, I had a lot of that already. Yeah. So I thought I can always go back to that if I wanted to. And people say, did I have no fear? Because this is a huge jump. And I could be arrogant and say I had no fear. But this narrative of let's experiment and let's try was driving in the backdrop. But I did. There was a moment, in those 2 years was tough, because anybody can be a great coach, but then to actually make a business out of it, it's a different level altogether. To make a living out of coaching is like, that's a different skill. So when you go to the coaching school of training, maybe they do it today, but they certainly don't teach you how to be a business person.
No.
So that was my 2-year experiment. And, it is. And that's what John, I remember his lesson to me said. He said, if you can make it to the first 2 years, then you made it.
So here you are.
Yeah, I am.
Here you are, having written your book and really speaking to the world around this audacity, this sense of audacity, and everything that's joined the golden threads of your life. I really like that one of the key themes that's coming out of this conversation for me is this sense of experimentation. It's almost calculated risk. And it's not like you've not felt fear. It's that you've got a way of managing it for yourself. And I think this is what's so interesting about these conversations. It's not, there's a whole thing about toxic positivity. And I'm curious about that phrase, really, because the more I talk to people who have a deliberate practice, I want to say, around the way they deal with fear, well, it's individual, obviously, but what I'm hearing from you is it's not like you don't feel it. It's not like you're not allowing yourself to feel it. It feels like, yes, it's a feeling. I recognize a feeling. Let's do something with that feeling.
Mm.
And for you, it's turning it into, reframing it into, what if I could? Or what next? Or so what? Let's find out. All of that sort of journeying. But then you've lived your life doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's interesting to me in this conversation. It's a practice that sat with you from a very young age.
Yes, yes. And it's almost like you and I do know, the sort of Enneagram, model in a way. And I'm a sort of active control. So I lead with action. You have action and thinking and feeling.
Yes.
So for me, the action is first, the feeling is second, and then my thinking is last, which is an interesting, because even in the team, in my family, we always play is like, when I am in a dynamic with someone who leads with thinking, like my partner, for example. So I give a very silly example where you go to a restaurant and I will make a decision like this. It's like, this is it first. I don't literally, I underthink. I underthink, because it's like, I'll try it. If I don't like it, I'll try something else. And it's also, that element of playful, patience. But I'm also aware that not everybody, of course, we all have different preferences, and fear is very individual to everybody. And I don't want to advocate for recklessness. For me, is like, audacity, yes, because it's got that. So for someone like me who leads with action, without really thinking through the consequences, there is risks attached to that. So I've learned to also, go through the 3 stages, but action first, and then we'll find out what's going to come out of it.
And a lot of my work starts with shed. Like you can't perform, you can't be your best, you can't do any of these things you've just been talking about if we don't have enough fuel in our tank. How do you look after that?
Yeah, I mean, the energy is a big thing with the fuel in the tank, as you said, because it's that sort of high performance is high energy. And so I've also learned the renewal part. So, really stopping. And I'm not saying I always do it. I still stretch sometimes. So, and now the body, it's telling me, but it's being much more deliberate and much more intentional about, and taking breaks. Actually, for me, it's like even going away more often now than I used to. Love going back more into traveling, and genuinely and, intentionally filling that tank, so then I can go back into action.
So that comes from stepping away for you more than anything, like through a holiday or going to see something that's a different environment.
Yes. Taking the dogs for a walk, if I, on a daily. So just really making sure that I built in enough of that where there is a recharge of the energy, because otherwise for me, I can go into, active doing and finding myself just doing and less of the breathing and being.
Thank you. If there were people listening to this podcast, Alina, who want to be better under pressure, what would be your 2 pay forwards to them?
Well, actually, it's probably what we've just finished off with. My 2 pay forwards. So one would be really manage your energy, because that was in rather managing time, managing energy. But for me specifically is managing on that higher energy, but positive energy, that just reframe in the positive if you can, and because that's a big thing that I've done with my own son is like, he says, I'm really stressed. And I say to him, okay, I know you are, but what could get you excited? Because it's sort of one and the same. So you almost short circuit that thought loop. So, yes, okay, that's difficult, but what would make it easy? So just play with that positive self-talk in that energy. And then the other one for me, so it would be, of course, the night, just do it is what comes, just do it. What's the worst that can happen? And and find out. I mean, I think it's because most people are paralyzed by this idea that, they can't actually change. And of course, there will be things that are irreversible, but they're very rare that we cannot change a decision. And it's interesting, you and I haven't talked about the yeses and the nos. What do you say yes and what do you say no to? Because that's a big part of it. But, for me, that was a big lesson because I lead with a yes, of course. It's like, yes. The Rich Brunson say yes and then find a way of doing it. And my challenge has been to learn that there is a no. And it started with my own son as to how do I teach him to accept a no. But for me, I had to learn that you can say yes to this and no to something else, but just do it.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Alina, so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Sara. That was, love you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Better Under Pressure with me, Sara Milne Rowe. If you enjoyed it, please do subscribe and let us know what you found useful or what you'd like to know more about. And don't forget, if you'd like to sign up for our fortnightly Pressure Points newsletter, where I summarise key points from each conversation, you can find a link at saramilnerowe.com. If you're interested in any of the practices mentioned, check out my book, The Shed Method. Alternatively, you can find us at Coaching Impact or me on LinkedIn and Instagram. Better Under Pressure was produced by the fab team at Smart Cookie Media. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, goodbye.